Space Invaders is probably one of the most important arcade games ever made. Even if you never played the game, you probably see it in pop culture references wherever you go. The person responsible for creating the game is Tomohiro Nishikado. He was designing, drawing, programming, and was handcrafting the game. The famous film director Steven Spielberg loved Space Invaders so much that he bought his very own personal cabinet. There is also an urban legend that Space Invaders caused a shortage of the 100 yen coin in Japan. The scenario got completely debunked fast, but it was a fun story to tell. In the beginning, Tomohiro was fascinated in making electronic devices in high school. He made radios or other audio devices using vacuum tubes. That hobby made him want to become an engineer, so he majored in electronics at the university in Tokyo. After graduating from university, Tomohiro's first job was at a company making audio equipment. About a year later, Tomohiro quit his job and joined the company Tido. Tomohiro's first game he worked on was called Skyfighter, which was a smash hit at the time. Even though Tomohiro's major at the university was electronics, his experience from childhood of physically making things really helped him out at work. The gaming company Tido's job was to try to bring back some of these American mechanical arcade games and try to figure out how they worked, and then imitate them. Basically, the company wanted to tweak, patch, or update things. Back in America, the popular arcade game at the time was Pong from Atari. Since Tomohiro has a background in electronics and a strong interest in video games, he decided to buy a copy of Pong and bring it to the office to analyze it. Unfortunately, the sales team didn't want to mess with any of these modern electronic video games, always saying that these things will never sell. Tomohiro didn't care. After figuring out how Pong worked, he made a soccer game. About 5 years before Space Invaders were made, Tomohiro was pumping out games. He made a game called Speed Race. He also made another multiplayer driving game for 4 players, which he called Fisco 400. There was also The Interceptor, which was a first person shooter and a fighter jet. Then there was a Western Gun, which was a side view shooting game where you dueled. For the longest time, Tomohiro didn't have to program these games. It was just electronics and various integrated circuits. It was all hardwire, with various bits of electronics put together. This meant that each game had its own completely unique hardware. That changed with Space Invaders. Let me explain. Space Invaders was the first major game that Tomohiro had to use code for, so he decided to write it in assembly. There was a CPU called 8080, and that CPU came with his own assembler. Tomohiro studied it himself and then wrote the game. But how did he come up with the idea and concept of the game? Well, we first need to look at the game Breakout by Atari. Tomohiro was completely shocked by its simplicity. This was because back then, video games were all trying to look more authentic and realistic, but Breakout was very simple and abstract. This made him realize that the fun factor is the most important part of a game, and not necessarily its graphics. The sales team at Taito was also interested in Breakout, so the company wanted to create something similar. Tomohiro wanted to switch the blocks in Breakout into a character. The other idea was, why not change Breakout into a shooting game? The best part of Breakout was slowly deleting all the blocks. That feeling was what Tomohiro wanted to recreate. That meant that the basic concept of Space Invaders was to basically clear the screen of enemies. Tomohiro was trying to figure out what to switch the blocks with. He was considering maybe tanks, battleships, or airplanes. However, he felt like using these kinds of shapes didn't look fun. So he decided to change to the soldiers, and that way he could animate them a bit and make them look like people. However, the plan to use people was probably a bad idea. There probably would have been a lot of backlash from parents and other people that would complain about having a game where the object is to shoot all the people in order to win. Around that same time, Star Wars was about to be released. This made Tomohiro consider using aliens. He felt like it would be okay to shoot aliens. I mean, they're not human after all. But why do the aliens look like this? Well, the aliens are based on sea creatures. That has to do with a novel by H.G. Wells called War of the Worlds. In that novel, the aliens are described as somewhat resembling an octopus. So that's why Tomohiro decided to make the aliens look like an octopus and other sea creatures. That's why you also have crabs and squids as aliens in the game. The game was released on April of 1978 and was extremely successful. The game saved the video game industry following the video game crash of 1977 and began the golden age of arcade games. It soon became the highest grossing video game of all time. Fast forward to present day, the creator of Space Invaders is currently 81 years old and still works. He's a technical advisor for the company Tido. That's great and all, but since Tomohiro has spent majority of his time in the video game industry, he sees game production changing during his time in the industry, with a shift from developer agency to increased interference from upper management. Back then, Tomohiro's style of working was to think of a game on his own and make it his own. There was no managers, no middleman making changes, or any top down interference. It's very important for creative people and developers to try to make something on their own and then see if it's fun or not. A good example would be Tido. I quote, "The game development process in Tido eventually changed, and we, the game creators, were increasingly expected to listen to the sales team, which came up with the new title concepts, and they thought it would sell," he says. Then we started game development based on that. Personally, I don't think that's the correct approach. Creators should try to make a game on their own first, and then it should expand into a larger project. This is what I felt throughout my whole career. Tomohiro really feels like the idea should come from designers and not management or marketing. Do you agree with this? Let me know in the comment section. I quote, "Obviously, if the game idea is too big for one person, then a small team making a prototype first is also fine. The point is that it needs to be creatively led first before the management gets involved. If you don't try to make something first, you will never know if it's fun or not." Tomohiro also felt like modern day game designers should be looking in the past for inspiration. Younger people who want to make games should play really old games, he says. They may not have good graphics, but there is something shining within them in a playable sense. There's definitely something to be learned from those games and also to inspire people to make something new. Forget about the graphics, focus on the core design. What makes it fun? If you made it to the very end, see you next time and thanks for watching.